This is Pro Wrestling INDIEstrated, a love letter to independent professional wrestling from PWI Magazine. I am one of your hosts, PWI Editor-in-Chief, Kevin McElvaney. With me, as always, the Good Witch, the Triple Goddess, Kaia McKenna. Kaia, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you doing? Good? Are you there?
Pretty good.
Couple of weeks?
You may notice that it's a little dark here, and we've got our guest here in a minute, and there's been a lot that's been standing in the way of us recording this conversation. I've really wanted to talk to our guest today. The latest of which, there's a power outage here at the PWI offices right before we're about to start recording. We're going to do our best to get through this because this is a conversation that I really do want to have. But Robert Martyr is joining us. Robert, how's it going?
My magic powers do not extend to restoring Wi-Fi. Sorry.
No, I guess not.
Yeah, I'm definitely good. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I'm a big fan of the show, so I'm glad that I'm here. We can talk about whatever you want. So let's go.
I mean, before we proceed, do you have any magic spells that can turn power back on? Because
I've heard about tush open, but that's never worked, so I don't.
Okay. Well, we have a lot that we want to talk to you about, but Kaia brought something up right before the power went out here that I think is of interest. And honestly, it's fed in pretty strongly to what you've had going on here in 2023. And Kaia, why don't you address that point again, and we'll go from there.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I believe that it was Restival New Year's weekend this year, and you had a match for Prestige against Anthony Henry, and it was a war. It felt like a 20-minute war, and he really beat you, beat you down on the outside. And the thing that stuck out to me the most about that is that you were so resilient and you did not give up, and you got back in the ring and you pushed him to his limits. And it felt like that night, like that was a big turning point for you in your professional wrestling career, and has kind of put you onto the trajectory that you're on currently and have been on for the past few months. Do you mind filling us in a little bit on that?
Well, yeah, that was my last match of 2022. So Restival weekend, I felt I had like a good year for myself, like the best year I had up to that point. But Prestige Wrestling was my only booking that weekend. It was my only shot to make an impression. And I really felt like, it was my first time in the White Eagle. It was my first time, in that area in Massachusetts in general. So I felt like either I put my entire body on the line, I put my soul in the ring, or I go home, forgotten, and I felt like at the time, Anthony Henry, like, he knew who I was because, we had met previously. I did ring crew for Evolve back in the day. So he had definitely seen me around, but I feel like he still saw me as that 14-year-old kid and not, the 22-year-old I am right now. And, I've never been pushed that physically in a match. Like, I genuinely... I sometimes I'll watch that match back just to see the people in the audience's reaction to things that were happening. There was this moment where he snap mirrored me. Go ahead, you cut out a little bit.
Yeah, that kick. It was very uncomfortable. Yeah. Like, you could feel it in the air, like the tension after he kicked you. Like, people were like, "Oh shit!" Like.
At least
you could tell people were like, you really made them suspend their disbelief in that moment. And I was like, this is pretty cool. Like, I've not seen people this invested in a minute. Like, it was awesome.
It was interesting because they weren't exactly like on their feet the entire time up until the end. They were just more like in shock of what they were watching, which I think is like a very rare emotion for wrestling fans to have. It's just like, what the fuck? What's going on? But that's really the big thing. When he kicked me in the back, I think I saw like 15 people in the crowd do this. And it was very interesting. As far as my career goes, I think it was a very pivotal moment.
Yeah, since then you've just, sort of continued to challenge yourself. I know I'm going to forget some names, but particularly at Prestige, because you had that huge match with Minoru Suzuki, absolute legend, one of the hardest hitters out there. Timothy Thatcher, another incredibly hard hitting wrestler. Both of these guys are also very technically adept, and I know that's a huge thing for you, is the classic scientific wrestling. One thing that hasn't happened with some of these matches is for you to rack up these big career changing wins. But at the same time, I think in a way, and I mean, I think back to something like ECW with Mikey Whipwreck, right? So he was this just inspirational Rocky type figure. He was not winning match after match after match until he did start to win the matches, and they really mattered because the fans are behind them. And I see this groundswell now where you're this underdog and you've gotten your ass kicked a bunch of times. What do you think it takes for this to turn around for you to really, you're getting this attention, but how does it really work in your favor where you can start capturing these championships and being seen as one of these high level independent performers?
Kevin, that's a good question, because I really don't know the answer. Mm-hmm. I've really tried everything. I've tried being mean. I've tried putting my entire body on the line in every match. I've tried antagonizing. I've tried using the fans and their motivation as fuel, and everything just hasn't worked. And I think the big difference between me and Mikey Whipwreck was that he only wrestled Steve Austin once. I'm wrestling 5 of them consistently. You have to look at the talent pool that I'm getting in the ring with. I'm getting in the ring with one of the best ever, Minoru Suzuki. I'm getting in the ring with arguably one of the best technical wrestlers of all time in Timothy Thatcher. Daniel Garcia, who's a mainstay in AEW. Vinny Massaro, a guy who's been a legend in the independent wrestling scene for I don't know how long. I'm not. How do I put this, man? Because I'm not. I truly believe I'm able to hang with these guys, and I've shown that. It's just the fact that I just can't figure out a way. And it's resulted in a stipulation. Daniel Garcia, someone who was my mentor at one point, said, if I can't win another match in Prestige, I'm done. And you know what? I accept. It's fair. I mean, there's plenty of other people that would love the spot that I'm in, right? There's plenty of people that would kill for the spot that I'm able to have. And if I don't put any numbers up, I'm just a body at the end of the day. And all I want to be is the best professional wrestler I can be.
And it's interesting because you're put into this situation at a particularly difficult, just precarious time. I mean, let's not mince words here. It's really put up or shut up time, because there's this massive rivalry that has been brewing between Prestige, which are primarily based on the West Coast, but of course there was an event at Restival. There have been events in New Jersey as well. And then Revolver, which is primarily based out of the Midwest, but has really been rapidly expanding. 2 very significant, we'll call them super indies for lack of a better word, because these are independent promotions that have their regional reliable talent who are there every single time, but they also bring in some really big names from across the globe. This is really the talk of the independent wrestling community in a lot of ways. And then here you are facing off against Jake Christ. And look, the power has come back on.
Told you it would work.
Yeah, eventually. Did the name Jake Christ do it? We may have to thank
Jake Christ himself, who felt the disturbance in the hair. But go, continue.
Yeah, so we have, this match coming up, and this is the newly crowned Revolver champion in Jake Christ. And then here you are, if you're going to continue your career in Prestige, you have to beat him. So what are you thinking heading into this match?
Well, it's actually not the first time I've wrestled Jake Christ. Mm-hmm. The second time I've wrestled Jake Christ. I wrestled Jake Christ in the first ever Circle 6 show, Skewer, back in 2022. And that match was very eye-opening to me, because I was very aware of Jake. I remember all of his time, and mid 2010s of at CZW, and he's really been a guy that I always felt was ignored, a guy that I felt like had so much more to offer than what he was let to do, and he's literally a true like veteran that's been around. But it helps, at least for me, that this isn't the first time I've been in the ring with him. I know how Jake is. I even remember the Chris combination that he hit me with to beat me. I can remember that. I can look back on that. And I think that's the one thing I've had that's an advantage over the previous matches that I had, because, I had never been in the ring with Minoru Suzuki. I'd never been in the ring with any of these people prior. But with Jake, I have. And I'm a completely different wrestler than I was back then. So I think this might be my advantage. Obviously, yes, he's the Revolver champion.
Right.
But again, I've wrestled as many big guys, as many names, as many legends as he has.
But, that's the thing. You're coming into this match now. Not only have you wrestled Jake Crist before, you've wrestled Minoru Suzuki before. You've wrestled Daniel Garcia, who's, at another level right now as well. Timothy Thatcher. You've gotten into the ring with some of the best out there. And then you're bringing that experience on top of everything else. I would have to hope, maybe not for your sake, for Jake Crist's sake, that he has been studying up with what you've been doing, because that luck has to tip in your favor at some point. And you do have these experiences that you can bring in there now.
That's a big thing too, just because of it isn't just my career now. It's the pride thing. I don't know the tensions that are going to be in that building, because I'm aware that there's going to be some other Revolver representatives there. So I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know what the morale is going to be like if I lose. Not only am I going to walk out of Prestige and be done, if I lose, I'll also be letting down the place that gave me a shot in the first place. And if you really look at my career, Prestige is really one of the only places to put that rocket on my back and give me a shot. So if I let them down, I don't know what I'll do.
It's a very interesting climate in which this match is occurring as well, because there's been a little bit of a competition lately between Revolver and Prestige, and it throws you right into the middle of that battle in a sense,
And it's been crazy. I mean, they sent Brian Keith to Prestige. Alan Angels decided he didn't want to be a part of Prestige anymore, and now is a Revolver guy. We've had so many conflicts, and Alex Shelley also being in the middle of it, because he is the Remix champion, and he also is the Prestige Wrestling champion on top of the Impact champion that brings everything kind of together. So it's just this mix of different places of who's watching and who could be seeing me in these moments, But honestly, for me, this is just about proving that I deserve to be here. And that not only that I can hang, that I can beat the best. Because I've proven I can hang over and over and over again. But, Kevin and Kaia, more well than anybody that hanging isn't going to get you money. Hanging isn't going to get you where you need to be. It's just showing that I'm able to be here. I need to excel if I want to be where I'm at. So.
And it's interesting too, because one thing that when I first talked about having you on this show with Kaia, right away she's on board, and one of the first things that she mentioned is what a student of the game is kind of a cliche at this point, but she talked about had an event on your phone, taking note. Didn't you say a notebook
doing tape
or something?
Study in my rental car. I'm talking to you, but you're just doing tape study, and I'm just like, all right, he's in the zone. It's fine. But always absorbing information, you're just a sponge for it. And it doesn't stop. It's 24/7, it seems.
Yeah, it's kind of become a meme at this point of just me being at professional wrestling shows, watching professional wrestling, preparing for a professional wrestling match. So it's kind of been this thing. I mean, I get it because I'm so enthralled. Like you said, Kevin, there's a lot of, students of the games thrown around, but I kind of have this weird reputation of just always watching wrestling and being a part of wrestling. Like you said, Kai, I was even trying to be.
That's passion.
exactly. Like I wasn't even trying to be like, ignore you. It was just like, oh man, I have this match. We're here.
Not take offense to it.
No, and it's crazy.
You're like, hold up 1 second, Kaia. Jumbo Ceruto is about to murder somebody, and I gotta watch.
I completely forgot about that. But
yeah,
like,
good.
And that's like I feel like I get it from my grandmother, because I guess my journey to get like learning about pro wrestling was a lot different from others. I didn't know what WWE was till I was maybe 13 or 12. I had no idea. I didn't know who John Cena was, Undertaker, none of those guys. I knew who Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio were. You know why? Because I had the AAA tapes from the 90s, and that was my exposure to professional wrestling. I didn't know anything about WWE until I got older and found it on TV. So my Undertaker was La Parka, okay? My Eddie Guerrero, was when I finally watched WWE and they announced him as the same name, I was like, that's the same guy? I watched Rey Mysterio when he was 16 in those early tapes, and then I see him as world champion when I'm watching WWE. It's my exposure to wrestling was completely different. Kevin, you know Roy Lucier. If you ever shout out to Roy. My grandmother was a tape trader and traded with Roy. I found this out.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's it has his name on it. I literally went back like 2 weeks ago and like got some of the tapes. I was watching Fuerza Guerrero versus El Dandy in EMLL 92, a good year. And it had Roy Lucier smack dab in the middle. Write his name. So my grandmother used to go to Mexico sometimes, and she would go to those shows and take pictures. So I literally have some pictures of Los Gringos Locos, La Parka, Lismar Jr., all of those guys. I have photos of them, like authentic photos probably nobody's ever seen before.
So this is wild to me, and so the eagle-eyed viewers will notice that the power went out again somewhere in the middle of all that for me. So we're just going to go with it, but it's probably hard to tell, but my mouth was just wide open for a lot of that, because that is a very, very unconventional path to wrestling. And honestly, you're probably going to get Kaia weighing in here with getting into Yahweh talk again. So it's going to get.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that your exposure to that at such a young age, and that sort of being your entry point, was a heavy influence on the style in which you currently wrestle, which is very technical based and very Yahweh based?
Absolutely. And I think like another thing too is my uncle, he liked wrestling at one point, but then he kind of fell out of it. And he had all these Ring of Honor and Chikara tapes and early CZW. Jeez, man, everything. Michinoku Pro on DVD for some reason. I think it was burned. Like, he had all these things. He was like, I don't really watch them. You want them? I'm like, of course I want them. Yes, I don't know what this is, but I'll watch it. And that's how I found out about Bryan Danielson, Chris Hero. Man, like, so many people. Homicide, Kenta, Kenta Kobashi, Masao. I literally was exposed to all of this wrestling. And I was talking to my friends about Chris Hero when I was in 9th grade, and I had no idea who I was talking about. I was like, you got to find this guy named Chris Hero. He's the best. And they're like, I know Batista. So I always.
I'm going to make myself sound old for a second. When I was in 9th grade, like, I remember you would order DVDs from Ring of Honor, and that was how I knew about Chris Hero. And like, there wasn't Twitter, there's MySpace and Friendster, I think, at this time period. That was like a thing, right? But you would just sit at your desk and you would refresh message boards trying to see, like, people would post results from the shows, or like maybe someone had some pictures that they took on like a really crappy digital camera, because camera phones weren't that great in like that time period either. So it's wild that A, that stuff has been preserved, but B, like, just thinking about how you can sit at a show and just watch a match on your phone now, like, from that time period, no big deal. It's just crazy to me. I just remember refreshing. Like,
wow.
And it's not even been that long ago. This is only like 10 some years. It's like,
well, if you want me to out old you there, Kaia, I remember, I think I was a senior.
Please make me feel a little bit less old.
I think I was a senior in high school, and I saw an ad in the Philadelphia Inquirer for a show at Murphy Hall in Philadelphia, and it was one of those early Ring of Honor shows. And I wasn't clued in enough at the time to know what a big deal it was going to be. But certainly some of these things that Robert was talking about, these. I don't think Chikara ever aired on that, but Channel 48 in Philadelphia, which was the original home of ECW before it became syndicated, at that time was airing CZW, and I guess once ROH started that as well, it was basically airing whatever local indies had tapes that sent them in, and maybe not in 2002 when Ring of Honor first started, but by a year or two later. And it's amazing that people just happen upon these. And yeah, it's like, even I remember seeing CM Punk, and I don't know if he had the Misfits trunks back then or something, but like seeing him on local TV back then, and like, who is this guy? And then of course now he's a big enough deal that there's a second TV show being launched on primetime because of him. So it's interesting the different ways we come to these experiences. And honestly, it explains a lot about Robert, your work ethic and your approach to things, that, you started with some of these less conventional, not less conventional, but less mainstream, less accessible forms of wrestling. And then you used that and had that store of information. Do you think that ever makes it, I don't know, more difficult for you to get some opportunities? Because like, well, listen, my approach to this is very like classic wrestling based, and it's not big over the top performances in terms of promos, or does that not even matter to you because you're just so into this approach?
I'll say like 2 years ago, all I cared about in pro wrestling was being a good pro wrestler. And now I feel like that approach has kind of changed. It's never really, I feel like good professional wrestling will always prevail. I don't care, no matter what I do. If my work is good, whether it's me in the ring or me doing a promo or me having a different, what's the word, like presence, I feel like good pro wrestling will always prevail. I don't think my approach to things will hinder me. I think it'll actually add to my experience. But now I feel a kind of a shift in who I am. Kaia remembers when I was wearing green trunks, and everybody was calling me Mini Daniel Bryan, Mini Bryan Danielson, and I wore that like a badge of honor. And then I realized, like, there's already a Bryan Danielson. There's already one. So who's Robert Martyr? And I think that's what I've been having my own journey through is figuring out who Robert Martyr is. And I think I'm getting there. I mean, I don't wear anything of what I wore maybe I want to say 6 months ago. I've really done really hard work on kind of showcasing who I am, especially with I think Kevin's gone, but especially with I want to say my promos. My promos have been a huge thing in my career.
Well, and, trying to find out who Robert Martyr is, that's a journey. It's not a destiny. You can just be like, who is Robert Martyr? All right, I'm there. I know. There's this whole learning curve and process that you have to go through to get to that point to find out who you are. Like, and in that process, you find out who you're not sometimes too, right? Like, I certainly do not wrestle the same way I did when I first started, or wear the same gear, or even make my entrance in the same way. But as you start to find out who you are and you become more comfortable with it, that's when you really start to thrive. Does it feel like you're starting to kind of figure it out now, though? Because you've put all this work into figuring out who Robert Martyr is?
I think I'm getting there. I think I'm still on a good road, and I'm still on I feel like this is the beginning of my journey as far as finding out the totality of who I am. And I feel like these matches are kind of showing me, like defining me, on specifically what Robert Martyr is and what I'm about. Because you can't fake those matches. You either have it or you don't. It's really like a sink or swim moment to be in that position. And if you don't perform, I mean, like, you won't be back. So I think me getting put through the fire is actually really helping me and helping my career and helping like people understand what I'm about without even me having to tell them, you know?
Totally makes sense. 100%. I agree with everything you just said there. You have to go through these trials and these tribulations to build yourself back up and be stronger at the end of the day.
Okay, so it looks like there's no dark, doomy sky here. I'm at home. Hopefully there won't be a power outage. Let me apologize, first of all, to the two of you for not being able to finish up the call with you last time. Thank you both for doing that.
I'm sorry, my magic couldn't fix the connection.
It seems like a different time and a different place, but maybe that's false. So I don't know what's happening.
Right, yeah. It's I mean, it is a different time and a different place. So a few weeks have lapsed since our last conversation. And Robert, we had to get you back on because we had to follow up on this because you had this stipulation, and we talked about, you know, your this kind of Rocky figure. Like, okay, you haven't been winning your matches, but eventually, like, the pendulum's going to swing the other way. You're going to get that big win, and your luck will start to change. That's not what happened. You had your career on the line with not career everywhere, but your career at Prestige, which is, you know, one of your home promotions, on the line. And we really thought you were going to pull it out. And unfortunately, that's not what happened. What do you do now?
Well, the thing was, I was going to pull it out. I was going to win. I mean, if you watch the match, that's how things back together. It was perfect. I had it. And then somebody who I've idolized for the past, I don't know, maybe 10 years of my professional career, the first independent wrestler I ever laid my eyes on, hit me in the back of the head and stole everything I've ever worked for. Mm. And that guy's Sami Callihan. As far as, like, what I'm going to do, I just have to move. I have to move forward. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing. I've tried to talk, you know, to Will. I've tried to speak to whoever I can speak to, but life's hard.
I wish I had something encouraging I could say to you. Yeah. Kai,
well, I do. I think sometimes even when things don't turn out the way we anticipated, there's a reason, even if we don't know it. And that brings me to my question for you, which is, where do you go now? Onward and upward, I would assume. But where? What's next?
At the time of this, as we're recording this, I'm making my Deadlock Pro Wrestling debut this weekend against their world champion, Lucky Ali. So I'm making my debut against their guy, their top guy, their world champion. You know, so maybe North Carolina wrestling might be the new passage for me. As far as other things, I'm as lost as you guys are. Prestige was something that I really put my all into. It's a place I prioritize, but now that I'm not there, there's kind of like this gaping hole in my schedule. So it kind of leads me to where I think I might look at, you know, going to the UK, going to Canada, maybe finding something different. I will be on West Coast Pro's LA show. The first time they're coming to SoCal, I will be there. I will be on the show. Manami Toyota's on that show, you know, so that's awesome. Very, very, very huge, very, very big for me. You know, it's not the end for Robert Martyr. Just because it's the end for me in Prestige doesn't mean it's the end for me. You know, you can look at my body of work in Prestige Wrestling and you can see all the hard work I've put in, all the great matches that I've had, but maybe now it's time to do that somewhere else. Maybe it's time to do it my way. Maybe it's time not to assume this underdog role and wrestle the way I want to wrestle and be the way I want to be. And maybe that's not the nicest. I don't really know, but I know that wherever I do go, it's going to be special.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So you've been wrestling at this one place and you've had a couple of matches and now that place is no longer an option. So to want to go out there and prove your worth so you can come back maybe later down the line stronger is certainly a great approach. You know, sometimes people don't see value in things until they're not there. So maybe that'll be the case, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, it pains me to say this, but maybe it's the change that I needed. Maybe I was so guilted and trapped by me not being able to win and me not being able to feel like I was myself. Maybe I needed this break. Maybe I needed to be stabbed in the back by my hero. Maybe this is what I need. And again, I'm still in that process, but I know this weekend, it's a whole new scenery for me. I've never been in DPW. I've never been in that environment. I've never wrestled Lucky Ali. We've met each other a lot of times. I know Lucky Ali very, very well, more than he would like to admit. And, you know, I see the things that he was versus the things that he is now. And I think those insecurities I can play on. So who knows? Maybe I might. It's a non-title match. You know, he's still going to keep the title at the end of the way. But if I beat him,
yeah, it's got to put you in line if that happens. I mean, you're a talented wrestler. You're young. It's not to undersell what happened to you, because I think it really stings with it being this promotion that you would put so much of yourself into. You know, on an emotional level, it's rough. But like, let's be real about this. A lot of people have lost loser leaves town matches over the years, and that's what this amounts to. Because your career still goes on. Your prestige career is gone. You know, done for now. But I mean, in wrestling, never say never. But there is something that I think we need to kind of go back on here. And you mentioned Sami Callihan, someone you looked up to. You're not just going to let him get away with this, are you? Because I think that's something that has to be reckoned with.
Thing is that Sami thinks he can get away with it. Sami thinks that I'm a small enough ant that he could do what he did and everything go back to normal. That's not the case. You know, I have friends, okay? I have people that are in high places. Not to say I'm flexing that, but Alex Shelley is still the Remix champion. I went to Revolver. I wrestled Alan Angels on the behalf of Alex Shelley and Prestige. Who's to say I can't make another phone call? Who's to say I can't get that sorted out? You know, honestly, Revolver is a place I've always wanted to be, but I didn't understand. I didn't think it was going to be this dynamic. I didn't think I was going to have this silent rivalry with somebody who thinks that I'm less than. But it's almost as if Sami Callihan is the embodiment of every person that's ever told me no. The embodiment of every single person who has told me that I shouldn't be doing this, and that I'm wasting my time, and I'm wasting my money, and I'm wasting my years, my health, my mental health. And I think the thing that stings the most is the fact that I truly, and I've said this about a lot of people, but Sami Callihan truly, for me, was that guy that got me into professional wrestling on an independent level. There was nobody that captivated me more. There was nobody that I felt that I was like, wow, this guy's special. And for him, even if he doesn't know that, for him to just do what he did to me, I will never forgive him. Ever. If this whole thing blows over, I go my separate ways, and I get my prestige career back, I will always hold that grudge against him, no matter what. So yeah, I'm 100% I'm going after Sami Callihan, whether he knows it or not.
The Revolver would be a great place to do it. It's home base.
Absolutely.
Well, honestly, I'm looking forward to seeing this. Is there anything else? I think you did plugs when I was, weathering that rainstorm. But if there's anything else you want to talk about, anything else that you have coming up?
Well, really, right now, all I have is DPW and all I have is West Coast. But there's a lot in the works. There's a lot coming out. I have something that I'm going to be posting in the next few days regarding the future of my bookings, the future of what's coming next for me, and the future of where I'm going to go next. Because honestly, for me, this is just a journey to nowhere. I'm a nomad now. I'm a desperado now. I'm a guy that doesn't really have a home, and I'm kind of content with that at this point. And it's interesting because now I get to figure out what's the next place for me. And I think that journey in itself is a good thing. So definitely catch me at DPW this weekend. It'll be, that specific segment of the show will be posted onto YouTube, so it'll be for free for anybody to watch. and West Coast Pro LA. I don't know what I'm doing on that show. I don't know what's happening on that show. I have We Are Wrestling on September 8th as well. I'm wrestling a dude, and I'm so scatterbrained right now. I won't lie. It just gets to me that like every day I have to wake up and live with the fact that I was screwed. You know, I never really got Bret Hart's whole thing about him being screwed. It was like, okay, yeah, then just go to another company. But when I am put in this position, I realized that all my sacrifices led to nothing. And I think that's the hardest part for me to accept. But if you want to see the next thing for me, wait the next few couple days on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. It's going to be big. I promise you that.
So thank you for joining us, Robert. Kaia, I think you should take this home here because I mean you've dealt with a lot of setbacks yourself, and I think as another wrestler, you might have some words of advice or encouragement for our guest here.
I mean, honestly, you can't be at Prestige. That definitely sucks. But if you had to be anywhere else, DPW and West Coast Pro are excellent promotions that book very stacked cards with very prestigious talent. So I think that you're on a pretty good trajectory, and it might take time to heal until you can see that. But I'm really excited to see where this next chapter goes for you.
Thank you, Kyle.
You're welcome.